we'll just take a few minutes, and again, we'll start with that first question. Do you see potential opportunities? If you haven't already, go to the last question, and that's again looking at long-term implications of not meeting the needs of your community. Last question. All right. Again, I encourage you to continue those conversations even after today's presentations. So, what's really, why is this so important for us as a church, as members, to understand the needs of our community? Tim showed this quote in the morning. It's from Ministry of Healing. It's Christ's method alone. I think that's pretty much the answer right there. Christ's method alone will give true success in reaching the people. The Savior mingled with men as one who desired their good. He showed his sympathy for them, ministered to their needs, and won their confidence. Then he bade them follow me. That's why I'm really excited about community service, because for me, it's like, Jesus mingling with people. He showed sympathy and he won their confidence. And after doing that, he said, follow me. And that's why for us, we believe in the cycle evangelism, because there's a system, a process, and then the follow me part is that evangelistic piece. Now, the quote for me doesn't end there. It continues in page 144. It says, there is need of coming close to the people by personal effort. If less time were given to sermonizing and more time were spent in what? Personal ministry, greater results would be seen. The poor are to be relieved, the sick cared for, the sorrowing and the bereaved comforted, the ignorant instructed, the inexperienced counseled. Now, don't take this and say, hey, you know what? We shouldn't do sermonizing, Pastor. No, it's not saying that, right? It says less sermonizing, and let's put more focus where? Exactly, in the community, personal ministries. A lot of the stuff that we're talking about is really just getting into the community. Serving your community gives God a face. And isn't that the ministry that Jesus came? When he came here on earth, he served people, he healed people, and literally he was the reflection, the character of his Father. So I want to share just some steps to community engagement. And I'm not saying that I have all the answers in the world. I believe that depending on your church, you know your community. But here are just some examples of ways that you can engage with the community a little bit more. Get to know the community, especially if you don't live in the community. I think a lot of times, I know up in Portland, we have many choices. And sometimes you have members coming all the way from Washington down to Portland and vice versa. But, it's really important that, and this is, again, obvious, is just get to know your community. I believe that community service needs to be on every church board agenda, always. It's really important to just have this in the forefront of our minds. Now, what are ways that you can get to know your community? One of them is attending community board meetings. So if not every community has a board meeting, but if you guys do some investigation and see, how you could plug in with these groups. And a lot of them are just, some key leaders in the community. Another one is attend clergy council meetings. And I think, Pastor, you mentioned a little bit about how you're connected with here at the university. That's awesome. I think that's really good already, a way of being able to connect with some other pastors in the area, some faith-based groups, because the reality is, when it comes to reaching community, it's all about networking as well, working with each other. And there's some people here that have been longer, in your neighborhood than you probably have. And so they already know what's going on, in the neighborhood. They already know what the needs are. And so plugging into those groups, it could definitely be very beneficial. Now, I like this quote. It says, salt can only be effective when it contacts the meat. We need to be out on the streets. You see the difference? We are the salt. The streets are the meat. And it could be tofu, it could be, veggie chicken, but you just got to go and be in the streets. Go and have those conversations with people. Go and have conversations, as Rob said, with people coming out of Starbucks, or go have conversations with other faith-based groups as well. So we need to make an impact in the community by being in the community. So number 2, again, steps to community engagement. Get to know the community leaders, and we spoke about this already a little bit. One way that you could get to know community leaders is meet with civic leaders to assess the community, the needs of the community, and also meet with law enforcement and health professionals. Again, they have so much insight, and especially with law enforcement, health professionals, they could give you a lot of more detail of some of the greater needs. When we were having the fires up in, I should say all of Oregon, but specifically in Clackamas County, I was able to meet with the chief of police and the chief of fire, and we were able to make those connections, and so they were able to at least let us know everything that was going on during that emergency process and how we were able to assist one another. So it's really important. Now, again, I believe it's really important to connect with civic leaders, and the reason why is because politicians pay attention to faith communities that pay attention to the community. The government is there for the people, and the church serves the community. So oftentimes, talking to government officials is that they want to assist what you're doing as a church. They want to help out, and they're excited when a church is doing some type of community project to help, whether it's homelessness or food bank ministry or some other project. They love seeing that, and oftentimes they want to partner with the church as well. So I know that it could be very awkward just thinking, well, what am I going to do when I go make an appointment with the mayor, right, or another leader? What do I say? So I want to introduce you guys to the community assessment sample interview, and actually printed out about 30 copies. I'm going to ask the guys here if they could pass these out, and these are for you to keep. So again, it's the community assessment sample interview. And this is something that you could memorize or maybe even take it with you as you meet with a key leader, and just ask them these questions. Ask them these questions so that you can best know your community. Is that the windshield survey? Okay, sorry, that's the next one. So, but still, it's good that you guys have it in your hand right now. So what I'm actually going to show you right now is the questions that you're going to be able to share with those, in leadership. So the first question that you can ask, or introduction, it says, introduce selves and briefly explain your purpose. Learn more about your community and discover if there's a way we can have a greater role in it. So automatically, as you're meeting with them, just introduce yourself. You can say, hey, my name is Andy. I actually belong to this Christian church, to the Seventh-day Adventist church. And, I'm really here just to know how I can help my city. So that's a great way to introduce yourself. Next is, how long have you been a part of this community? So just asking them questions about their ties to the neighborhood. What changes have you seen during that time, since you've been part of the community? What strengths do you see in this community? What would you like to see different? And is there anybody else you would recommend that we talk to? And then just thank them for their time, and before, when you leave your contact information with them. And then always it's nice to be able to send them a follow-up email, again, thanking them for their time. Now, if you're going into the meeting and you already have a particular ministry in mind, this is something that you can continue asking. So, or have in mind, include people associated with that field in the slate of interviews. So include a question or two related to what you're thinking about doing. And also, as the idea develops, then share the idea and ask their opinion and suggestion. So again, if Corvallis or Albany, Sweet Home, or Lebanon, if you guys have a really unique ministry in mind, and you're already trying to gather the ideas and possibly have resources already, meet with some of these key leaders and just ask them these questions. Hey, what do you think about this? Just recently, our conference, our department has a shower trailer. And I've always used it for the literature evangelism program, so students have a place to shower during the summer. And so we've just been recently thinking about, okay, how can we use that maybe for a homeless ministry in partnership with churches? And so I've been making calls, recently, and just saying, hey, so we have this ministry, and we want to use it this way. Is there someone that I could connect to? And during the whole process, I was very surprised of how just willing they were to just help me and say, hey, we have this park where you could put it, and they have a hose set up, and you could hook up to the power and things like that. And it was very surprising because I thought I was going to meet a lot of resistance. But on the contrary, they were actually really excited about the idea, and even shared with me there's actually other faith groups, non-denominationals, that reach out, and they have a similar ministry. But again, use some of these questions to connect with your key leaders. Going back to steps to community engagement. Number 3, look to deposit before you withdraw. Look to deposit before you withdraw. As a church, we don't want to go and meet with some of these leaders and just say, hey, gimme, because how are they going to view us, right? That we're just taking resources, that we're just taking that, I think already as it is, people just see the church here and not really involved with the community and not contributing to our neighborhoods. They already see us that way. So it's really important to deposit, give back to our community, give back to our neighbors, and anybody else that you have that connection with. Walk the community. Number 4. For those of you that love to walk, this is another great way to engage with the community. So why walk the community, or how do you, what you can do when you're out there? Use your senses. So as you're walking your neighborhood, use your senses, see and smell and hear. When I have the opportunity to go door to door and do a ministry, I always like to get those, that good smell of a barbecue, going. And I was like, it smells like carne asada, I often say, or I could hear specific music and I think, oh, those are my people. I know who they are. But just being out there going door to door really gives you an idea as you're walking community, who is living here. Another thing is it gives you credibility. As you're out there and walking, people are going to see your face. And you're going to have opportunities to, greet people and introduce yourself, as members of the local church. So it gives you credibility. And also it gives you a new perspective of who's around you. You guys are sharing the neighborhood. And so it's important to understand where you guys are at. So one source that I just, Tim and Rob just passed out is the windshield survey. And again, it's a great way to be able to go into your communities. You can either take your car and drive through your neighborhood, or as I mentioned, you could walk. So when you're doing the windshield survey, make sure that you're taking notes, take observations at face value. So as you're taking notes, don't make an assumption or try to make an interpretation of what the community needs, right? Just take notes at face value. So again, you may drive it or walk it, but if you walk it, you could turn it into a prayer walk as well. So those are definitely a huge blessing. I had a pastor that I knew down in Southern California, and he actually was a volunteer, volunteer police officer, or whatever they call him, but he was a volunteer. So what he would do, he would actually put on his uniform, and he would walk literally just in the same blocks of his community, and he would introduce himself as a local pastor. And so that was one way that he was able to connect people in the community, ask them questions, and pray with them. And just by doing that, he built that credibility, and people would actually come to the church because of that introduction. And I'm not putting the pastor on the spot. I'm saying every one of you can do that. You don't have to put on a police volunteer uniform, but you can still be able to do stuff like that. So again, that was the windshield survey. Last one is just open your church doors for community services. Most of our churches are just open on Saturday and Wednesday nights, right? For Bible study or prayer group. There's a pastor here in Oregon, and I won't call him out because I don't want you guys to contact him and say, Andy told me this about you. But, this is what he says, and it really stood out to me. He says that he gets really upset because he feels that many of our churches let our assets go to waste. that we leave a lot of our properties and our resources and our assets just go to waste because we only are open on Saturday and Wednesday. And that's such a big pet peeve of his. And so something that I recommend, again, to engage with your community is use your properties and assets for community engagement. Open up the church for Adventist community services. And again, I'm excited to see where your conversations from here lead to, and depending on your respective church. So also, if you are interested in urban community needs, I made a quick list of things that I think most communities can relate to. Homelessness, affordable housing, intervention programs, gun violence intervention, health education centers, and safe houses for abused and battered women. A lot of these things, it's something that if the church is very passionate about, you guys could work together, bring your resources together. But again, going to a local government agency or a nonprofit that deals with a lot of these things, you could pretty much just start something like this. For example, the church in Tillamook, they have micro shelters, right? And our team actually has gone and we've seen videos and pictures, and they have these micro shelters there on the property. And so what they did is they built them because they had members that learned how to build something like that. But they actually they didn't give it, but they actually brought in a nonprofit to be in charge of running it. And so they kind of bring people to fill in the micro shelters, and they help them for their next transition. Let's see. Now I want to give you an example of a church in, and again, quotation marks, a church in the community. So an example of a church in the community is it does not desire to influence the community. Again, that's the church in the community. Maybe described as a fortress, holding the outside world back. Invest nearly all of its various resources on its own members. Takes up space in the neighborhood. Members commute into the community for service and meetings and then leave again. The church does not pay taxes and is a net drain on the community. I'll give you an example. Again, as Rob mentioned, in 2020, we not only got hit with the pandemic, but we also got hit with some major wildfires. So this opened an opportunity for our department for disaster response and community service to open Hope Valley, there on Gladstone campus. So we opened it up. The Red Cross reached out to us, and the county also reached out because we've already created those partnerships. And they reached out and said, we have a lot of people that are fleeing because of these fires. We opened it up. We had about 150, 200 RVs coming to our grounds. Typically, it's only used for camp meeting, right? But now we're having people that are just fleeing from the fires, and it gives us an opportunity to serve them. Now, what's really interesting is that as we were connecting with people in the community, because they were very interested to know what's going on, what's going on here. We usually just see in the summer. There was an individual actually that pulled us aside and said, I'm so happy to see what you guys are doing. And we would have volunteers come and from the neighborhood and say, what can we do? How can we help? What do you guys need? But this particular person was just so excited to see what we're doing. And one of our pastors continued the conversation, and he found out that the person was always upset there of the campground. He was always upset. And the reason why is because during camp meeting, the power, like the water pressure was so low for the neighborhood. So they were always thinking, who are these people that are just really draining our water pressure? They had no idea what was going on during the summer, during camp meetings with all these people who were there. And that's kind of, again, a church in the community. That we're really just there serving us, but we forget about the people that are around us. So I want you to think about this. Community service. I've always seen it this way, but I just recently, someone showed me this new perspective. And hopefully it stands out to you as well. So no longer just community service, but it's now community service. You see it? You are an integral part in your community. And I think it's really important for many of us to start seeing it that way. You know, it's not us and versus them. It's all of us. You, this church, and the other churches represented here, you are such an integral part into the community that you serve. Briefly, I'll just share a quick story of a church in the suburbs. This is a church that was actually, kind of in a rural area in the suburbs there, and there were members that would commute, mostly come in on Saturday mornings and then leave. And this neighborhood wasn't a big fan of this church at all. And so they actually, had a lot of complaints, and they found out about these complaints because one day some church members decided to go, knock on doors and talk to the community. And so one specific neighbor said, I'm tired that you guys only come and then you guys are gone. And the member asked, well, what's wrong with that? And the neighbor said, well, when you guys are gone at nights, people come into your parking lot and sell weed, and they buy weed and all this stuff. And they were saying, well, because the church had these hedges around them. And they were hedges that were like 5-6 feet tall. And so when people were pulling into the parking lot to, again, buy their weed and sell, weed, like they weren't, you couldn't see them. And so the church said, okay, well, we probably should cut the hedges down. And just by doing that little simple act of bringing the hedges down to 2 feet, the community was happy. I mean, what a difference just by going to the community and finding, okay, let's listen to them. Let's see what's going on. Let's hear from our neighbors. So what I want to end with just quickly is encourage you to begin listening to your community. We obviously share with you the ministry match, but it's really amazing to be able to actually go just down the block and come on, do a U-turn and start getting to know your community, see what's going on. Don't be afraid. They might tell you some things that they don't like about you guys, but that's okay, right? That's a process of learning and growing. So just go around the block, the corner, and ask them how they view your church. Build that bridge on both sides, but it starts with the church. The church needs to lean towards the community, and the community leans towards the church. But what I want to encourage you with, and again, the end of the presentation, I just want to encourage you, just choose one thing. Choose one thing that each one of your churches can do that is kingdom impact, that is, again, for personal ministry and community service, think of one thing and do it well. Don't think about 10 things and try to do them because you're going to burn out. Just try one thing and use that one thing to serve your community. A couple questions, at least for you to think about relating to the presentation is, what does the community see when they look at your church? What does the community see when they look at your church? Last one is, what are ways that you can increase community awareness at your church? What are ways that you can increase community awareness at your church? At this time, I'm going to invite Rob to come up. We're going to focus on putting it all together. I mean, it was a really great couple of presentations. We hope you guys were blessed so far, but we want to make sure that before we finish, that you at least have a picture in mind and how you can put that practically with your respective churches.
Okay, well, we're at the end, folks. This is it. It's been a journey, hasn't it? I know you're probably tired, but this is it. We just wanted to, as we end, do a little bit of review, open up for some questions and answers, and have one little final exercise for you to do in your groups, and then have a prayer, and that's it. So that's the trajectory for the rest of our time here. Let's start with a little bit of review. Do you guys mind coming up, and we'll just each share in one phrase or so, what were the topics that we each shared and talked about? So Tim, you started with number 1.
Yeah, so just as a quick review, that the first presentation, we looked at the needs of the community, we looked at the Percept demographic data, and we saw 4 specific highlights. We saw what the ethnic breakdown was of the community, we saw what the religious preference was, we saw what the concerns and what the interests were of the community. So that was what we started with.
Yeah, and this morning, yes, we talked about having spiritual conversations with secular people. You remember what those 3 points were that I shared? What were the 3 points? What was number 1 from this morning? Yes, not all the same was 1. Not all unchurched people are the same. Number 2 was the easiest way to start spiritual conversations is to ask questions. And number 3, do you remember what it was? Always be what? Kind and pleasant. There you go. Thank you.
All right, and then this morning we talked about embracing a culture of evangelism, and one of the reasons we're doing this review is to jog your memory, to see if you have any questions. We've been giving you a lot of information, like drinking from a fire hose, and so we want to make sure that you have the chance to ask some questions so we can have some dialogue as we wrap up together. So as we remind you of what we've covered, it might jog your memory of maybe a question or a piece of a conversation that we want to have together. So yes, is there... Yeah, that's a great question. So the question is, are the slides that we presented this weekend going to be available online? And I'm happy to send them to the pastors, and we can get them out that way if that works for you guys. So yeah, awesome. Good question. Like I said, I know it's a lot of information to process. Very good. We will have a Q&A time in just a moment, so be thinking about your questions as we're reviewing, and then we'll go through that together in just a moment. But yeah, this morning we looked at what it looks like to be a transformational leader, what it looks like to think in systems thinking, and also how to follow an evangelism cycle, which is really following the example of Jesus and how he reached people.
This afternoon, we talked, man, it seems so long ago, and it was just like establishing an intentional online presence. We talked about choosing the right audience, choosing the right platform, and choosing the right content. I was just stretching you a little bit to think intentionally about reaching a target audience, especially online, as that is a growing need in our communities today.
I don't remember anything, but it was, again, just leaning and listening into your community and looking at practical steps on how to engage your community as well.
Okay, now it's time for questions and answers. So was there anything that we presented that popped a question in your mind that you want to talk about?
Maybe can we have someone walk around with the mic, and we'll stay up here in case we have questions that we can...
A microphone.
Microphone is coming. You can steal one of ours. We don't need... Okay. We have a microphone coming. We want everybody to hear the questions.
Yes.
In case you have one.
And
while that's being... while we're getting a microphone in the back, I just wanted to address one of the questions that we had. I think it was Debbie, was it you who asked the question about the ministry match, and where are these questions coming from? How do they know it's for the churches? Was that the question? And one thing that I would love to just draw your attention to is in that source book that we shared with you, from page like 40 to 50 or so, it actually explains the survey, where they got the information, when they got the information, and it actually shows you examples of questions that they've asked on that survey. So here's an example of a question they had on that survey that people answered. Number 9 says, if you were looking for a new church or synagogue, which programs or services would be most important to you? Please choose up to 3. Enter items in box below. So they give a list of 17, and so people rate them. So that's just one question. There's a lot of those kind of questions on there. I think Percept data has a more generalized survey, but then this one goes into more of the church and related to churches, that kind of survey.
You have to
I
think.
don't know. Yeah.
That's a good question. You have to think programming, So I don't know if that was camps or something like that. Some churches do those kinds of events. So yeah.
It's all in there. I would just suggest reading through, and you'll get a clear picture. Any other questions for any of us?
There's one back there, wasn't there? That was the question.
Oh, okay.
Awesome. Before you call, I will answer. Right?
Yeah, go ahead.
Doing online, online ministries. You have people who commandeer or basically mess with your content and with your.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would say that question actually reminds me of something that Rob shared in his Sabbath school presentation. Do you remember those 5 doors and the one on the far left? What was that one? Hostile or antagonistic? Do you remember what percentage that one was? 5%. But that's the one we worry about the most, isn't it? And it's the same online. We found that, and the reason I mention this is because everywhere we've presented on online ministry, we always get that question. And so I think it's worth addressing that. When we go online, sometimes we're always worried about getting somebody who, because let's face it, on social media, people can be ugly, right? People can not be always the kindest, and so we can worry about that. But the key is when you are showing that you're there to give value to people, I think that tends to disarm people where they're not going to be coming at you as much. And I will say that in our journey, we've reached, hundreds of people online, and we've only had, I think, 1, maybe 2 difficult individuals. So they are out there, and it can happen. But yeah, there was one story where there was a gentleman that was he was really not there for the right reasons. He was just trying to cause trouble, and we tried to work with him, and he wasn't willing to cooperate. And so eventually we said, I'm sorry, but I don't think that our community is the best fit for you. And so we were able to actually, block him from what we were doing. And so sometimes you do have to have those boundaries, and it's good to be ready for those kinds of things. Yeah, and there are tools as well that you can use. For example, I'll tell you a funny story about a tool that we used online. There's a tool that you can use. It's called a profanity filter. And the reason I say that's funny is because we found that a lot of the programs we started on Friday evening. And what do all the dear Seventh-day Adventist saints like to say on Friday evenings? Happy Sabbath, right? And so we were trying to think, how do we fight this? We could try to block all the comments as they come in, but that's not very friendly to the community because they don't know what a Sabbath is yet. And so we actually got creative, and we added the word Sabbath in the profanity filter. So that way, if anybody tries to say Happy Sabbath, it immediately will block their comment. Anyway, of course, once we talk about the Sabbath in our presentations, then we remove that as a part of the filter. But anyway, I share that in a humorous way to also highlight the fact that there are tools that you can use that try to safeguard against people that have malicious intent. Yes?
I heard focus on one thing, and so is the community service necessarily to your target audience, such as giving gifts to international students, or is it something completely separate that your church is doing for the community?
Trying to understand your question. So your question is between. What was that?
Yes, so you want a target audience that you're trying to reach.
Uh-huh.
Is that I think is very different than community service, talking to your mayor and finding out what the needs are in the community.
Oh, yeah.
Such as food banks or this or homelessness.
I see.
And so how much time are you spending on connecting with your target audience, and how much time are you spending on community service? And can your target audience be your community service also?
Well, there's an idea.
And
Sure,
such as
that's a great
if it's your
idea.
international students and
Yeah.
they're lonely and you're giving
Yeah.
gift bags to your
Yeah.
international students, but should it also be
Yeah.
different too for your community service? And how much can you do without getting too scattered?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say that the target audience was mostly shared in the context of online ministry. But I would say there is also overlap with that concept when it comes to reaching, people in person as well, where especially, you look at the data and say, okay, so we see that, like Rob and I have been sharing about this church in Canada, they recognize that single moms was a big demographic in their community that really had needs that they wanted to reach. And so you could create an avatar or a single mom, let's say you give her a name and you walk through what her struggles are in her daily life, and, maybe she doesn't have a way to get her kids to school or whatever it is, and then you find ways that you can reach her, you reach that target audience. And so, community services can be part of that process as well. So it kind of depends on what the need is and, what your resources are, but there is some overlap there.
Yeah, I would also say that just because you have a target audience doesn't mean you stop ministry for everybody else. What having a target audience does is it helps define who it is that you're trying to reach. Because many times when we talk about outreach, it's really nebulous. It's like, oh, we're just trying to reach them out there. But as soon as you add a name to that person, you know their story, all of a sudden, what you're trying to do in outreach, either online or in person, is much more intentional because you know their pain point. So it doesn't mean that we stop all ministry to everybody because we only want to focus on international students. No, you're a church. You should be ministering to anybody who walks in these doors. But when people think of your church, what if they thought, like, that church is a church where people feel loved, but you know what they do really well? They really treat international students like family. So that's one of the things that I would just try to encourage people not to think of as target audience as you're excluding everything else. It's more of a something that you do intentional. It's more intentional.
Yeah, and on that note, we have seen a lot of power when a church, they reach everybody, or they're open to everybody. However, when a church really finds a specialty, when you figure out, based on the needs of the community and the resources that you have to offer, this is what we do well. And then you can use that in your communication with other churches, and with your community, with the leaders, and where you suddenly become known in the whole community. Oh, that's the church that really meets this need. And there's a lot of power behind that, because if other churches or if other community leaders that in their work, if they run into people that need what you have to offer, they're going to send them your way, because they're going to say, oh, you're an international student, or oh, you're a single mom, or whatever it is. Go see the Seventh-day Adventists. They're the ones for you, and you'll gain some traction that way. And we've seen that to be really powerful.
I was just going to say, I guess I mentioned that just in the context of community service, where, and I might have said, okay, the extremes of only do one, but then don't do 10, right? But if your church has a capacity to take on 2 good projects, and as, Rob mentioned, like, the church is really known for these 2 things, then go for it. I think, we're the body of Christ. We are the hands, the feet of Jesus, and that's what God calls us to do.
Very good. Any other questions? Okay. One more there in the back. Yeah. I'm sorry, can you repeat that last part again with the microphone so we can hear
We
you?
farm, we deliver produce to food banks, the one weekly to Lebanon and Sweet Home. And I was just thinking, we have lots of strawberries right now. And I was just thinking of Deborah's idea, because I could drop off a couple flats at the Into building of strawberries with a sign from friends at the Seventh-day Adventist Church, with a little map. And there's things that I guess can't overlap like that, And if we don't talk about it, because I hadn't thought of it till Deborah said something. So I guess talking, collaborating.
Absolutely. Yeah, I want to affirm you for that comment because that gets me excited. You know, as we work with different churches and pastors, we find out that we have some amazing pastors and some amazing church members. Of course, I might be slightly biased, but, you know, you hear these amazing, gifted, talented individuals and ministries, and then you'll go and talk to another pastor or another church, and, like, they might not have a clue about each other. And so that's one of the things that I think there's so much potential is for churches to start collaborating and working together. And you know, some churches, I don't want to step on any toes if there's this dynamic in this region, but I've seen in some regions there's a dynamic of, you know, like a territorial dynamic. And I think it's important for us all to remember that we're on the same team here, you know, and let's work together and even pool resources together, whether that's talents or time or whatever it might be. And, you know, if one church needs something and another church has a resource in that way, you know, we can kind of overlap that way. I think there's a lot of potential there to come together. And so that's one of the other reasons why we're excited about this kind of an approach of inviting, you know, a whole region together so we can start having some of these conversations. And that's why we present the data for all the churches, because some light bulbs might go off and say, hey, you know, Lebanon, they could use this, and we have somebody that can meet that need, or whatever it might be, and some of those connections can start happening in our minds. So thank you for sharing that comment. Okay, we have a hand right over here. We can get a microphone. Thank you, John.
I think in a way it's already been mentioned, but something we wouldn't have expected 3 years ago was to see the response from the community after COVID, and especially with our school. We ended up being able to, I think, scratch an itch that we had been trying to scratch for a long time, but the itch hadn't started until COVID. And so I think that's presented an opportunity for us that doesn't show up on these lists because it's really quite new.
That's awesome. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that, because, you know, like we mentioned last night, the data we're presenting this weekend is just one reference point. But you guys are here. You guys are the ones in the trenches, and so you may see things that doesn't show up on the data. So it's important to have multiple reference points of data. So thank you for sharing that.
On our meeting number 2, having spiritual conversations with secular people, and you gave those statistics, antagonistic 5%, resistant 21%. So those two groups came up to 26% when I added them together. And then the other 3 groups being neutral 36%, interested 27%, and friendly 11% comes up to the 74%. You know, we're almost, in visiting with people, we're more concerned about meeting that someone in that group of 26%, when really, in reality, there's way more of that are open and interested in talking with us about it. And so I found that very encouraging information. And also think about heaven, the angels that were kicked out, and how many good there are. Same numbers. Just a side note.
Wow.
I thought about that.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. Okay. Thank you so much for your questions. We don't want to leave anyone out if there's one last one, but all right. We'll keep going here, and then if you think of something else, feel free to raise your hand. So the next activity that we'd like for you to do, the final breakout into groups, is to look at SMART goals. How many of you have ever heard of the concept of a SMART goal? Okay, I'm seeing a few hands. This is what the acronym SMART stands for. The S stands for specific, the M is for measurable, the A is for achievable, the R is for relevant, and T is for time bound. So what does that mean? You know, when we set goals, sometimes we make them vague without even realizing it. So on a personal goal setting, in that arena, you might have somebody that says, well, my goal is I'm going to lose weight. Well, how specific is that? That's not very specific, is it? So that's a vague goal. I would like to lose weight, as opposed to saying, I would like to lose 10 pounds. You see how that's specific? So that's the difference between a non-specific and a specific goal. What about the M, measurable? again, when you get specific, that can also help it become measurable. So in that example, how will you know? That's the question for measurable. How will you know when you've reached your goal? You need to have some piece in your goal that allows you to know when you've achieved that goal. If you just say, I want to lose weight, well, how do you know when that's happened? But if you say, I want to lose 10 pounds, well, how will you know when that's achieved? When you step on the scale and you see the number is 10 pounds less than it used to be, right? Can you see how that's specific and it's measurable? So it's important to have those two elements. A is achievable. So you're not going to say, I'm going to lose 100 pounds, right? Or whatever it might be. Right? You want to make sure you're not setting such a high goal that it's never going to be realistic to achieve that. And then the R is relevant. And this is a key one. How relevant is this goal to either, if it's a personal goal, that would be how relevant is this goal to my overall quality of life? Or maybe in a church context, like we've been talking about this weekend, relevant might be how relevant is this goal to the mission of our church? Or how relevant is this goal to our target audience? Can you see how you can go a number of different ways with the relevance on this? And then T is time bound. So instead of just saying, I would like to lose 10 pounds, you might say, I would like to lose 10 pounds by next month or by a few months from now or whatever you choose. And so setting a date to it or setting a time frame to it allows it to be much more impactful. And so studies have shown that when you make your goals SMART goals, there's a much higher likelihood that you'll actually achieve those goals, especially if you add a final piece to it, and that is the piece of accountability, of who will hold you accountable and how will you have that system working for you. So are there any questions about SMART goals, or is that clear? Okay. What's that? Marta? Okay, there you go. Got it. Right, there you go. So what we'd like for you to do now is to get back into your groups and make 1 to 3 SMART goals. So you can go a number of different ways with this. It might depend on some of the conversations maybe you've already been having. If you guys want to maybe talk about SMART goals along the lines of online ministry, you could go that route. Or maybe you might think about setting some SMART goals for your evangelism cycle, or maybe SMART goals for an Adventist community service project, or defining your target audience. It could be a number of different things, but we'd like for you to make it practical. This is your moment to take everything that we've been learning so far this weekend and help the rubber meet the road with it, right? So let's go ahead and take a few minutes to get together in our groups, and I'll keep this slide up on the screen. And so as you're looking at your goals and talking about them, go through each one of these 5 steps and make sure that your goal has all 5 of these elements to it, and this will really be a powerful resource for you moving forward. So let's go ahead and do that now. All right, let's take one final minute and wrap up the conversation, and then we'll come together. All right. All right. Some great conversations I know you guys are having. So just wondering, the last thing we wanted to do before we invite Pastor John to come up and share a closing prayer with us is just to have a time of sharing our biggest takeaways. So this, we already heard a few, and we really appreciate you sharing that. but we want to just give you the chance as you reflect on this weekend, if there is something that was of real value to you that you want to share, was a big takeaway for you throughout the presentations, or it could even be something that just is emerging from your conversations. So if there's something that you would like to share as your takeaway for the weekend, we want to give you the opportunity to do that before we close with prayer. Does anybody want to share? Okay. Oh. Okay, very good, very good. Starting in 2 weeks, okay. Awesome, I like it. So I'm wondering if you would be willing to share. Have you guys come up with a solid SMART goal, or is it still kind of in the making, or?
Our SMART goal for now is we're going to come up with a survey, and that's, of course, measurable because we're going to come up with a survey within 2 weeks, and then we're going to meet in 2 weeks, and then plan from there.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, very good.
And the survey is in regards to a little community, low-income community that Lorelei lives in, and we're going to try to do relational little meeting there. They have a meeting house, either parenting class or relational. We're going to do, that's the survey to see what would bless them.
Okay,
Yeah.
excellent, very good, nicely done. Awesome. Yeah, well, we're excited to hear that and to see how it goes, so that's awesome. Okay, anyone else? Is there another SMART goal that came out of your discussion that you'd like to share, or another takeaway that you want to make sure you, sometimes just verbalizing it helps it to cement itself in your memory more too. So if there's something you don't want to forget that you're taking away from this weekend that you want to share, now's your chance to do that. Anyone else? Okay.
Our brains are mush.
Yeah, I hope we didn't give you too much. I hope it didn't
Oh.
overwhelm you. Okay. Yeah. Sure. Okay. Mm. Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay. Very good. Yes, over here. Okay. Yeah. So your question is, how do you get started in online ministry? It sounds like you have some ideas for content, maybe, but are you wondering more along the technical side of things, how to get that going? Is that kind of what you're asking? Sure. Yes, that's an excellent question. So these guys might have something else to add, but I would say involve your young people. You know, so it tends to be scary for the older generations, maybe more so. And so if you have young people that are, you know, on these social media platforms, which most of them are, you know, that's a great opportunity for you to engage them and make sure that they have a part of the church's mission through that. And there's a lot that we can learn. You know, sometimes when we think of young people, we think of, you know, mentoring them in the ways of church and ministry. But when it comes to online digital ministry, sometimes that mentorship is the other way around, where they're mentoring us and how to do that. So, is there something you want to add, Rob?
Yeah, I would like to add something. Thank you for the question. That's a great question. I think we can help you if your church would like to go down that road. Reach out to us. We'd be happy to sit down and kind of get a game plan to help you get a trajectory of how you want to do it. The only thing that I want to leave with you is just to ask yourself, what part does that play in your overall journey? So one thing I would love to just encourage you as churches, different churches represented here, to not focus on just one event. We're going to go and do a survey and we did it. What part of the journey is the survey? So what part of a person's journey is learning something online about the great hope or steps to Christ? Is that at the beginning of someone's journey, at the end? How can you add a value along the way? It's what Tim talked about this morning. It's looking at evangelism as an ongoing process and having intentional steps along that journey. So just a question to think about, yeah. But we'd be happy to help.
Yeah, we're happy to help. Also, our team, the Outreach Ministries Department, we have some skill with that. Also, the Communications Department at the conference office also is a resource for you as well when it comes to some of those things. And just to piggyback off of what Rob was saying, I want to remind you, and I think your pastor knows this already. Your pastors know this already, but I want to remind you that one of the ways that our department serves our churches is through partner funding. And so every year, actually now twice a year, we open it up for funding requests where we say, let us know what your plan is for evangelism and what the budget is, and we'll help with what we can financially. We want to be a resource for you with what we can financially. And so when a church asks for funds, and again, your pastors will know about this, but when your church asks for funding, we now ask you to submit a plan for your entire evangelism cycle. So it'd be great for you guys to already be having some of these conversations like Rob is saying, as you're saying, well, let's do a survey or let's do a video thing on the great hope or whatever it is. All these are great ideas that are emerging, and as you're thinking of these ideas, be thinking of that in the context of an evangelism cycle, because that will come in handy when it comes time to request funds from our department. When we can see all the pieces of your evangelism cycle and how they all fit together, we're happy to fund that kind of a plan. So very good. All right. Any other final comment, takeaway, or question before we wrap up? Yeah. Thank you. It's about them, not about us. That's so key. Giving them value. All right. Thank you so much. Oh, did you have something else, Rob?
Yeah, just one more thing. I have to apologize because till today, I thought Lebanon was pronounced Lebanon. So I apologize. I keep saying Lebanon. Is it Lebanon? Lebanon. Okay, I will use Lebanon from now on.
Now we know. Now we know. Yeah, I was telling the guys who were talking about it. My wife and I, we used to live in Florida, and there was a city there, and we thought it was Kissimmee. But then we found out the locals call it Kissimmee, so it's easy to tell if you're a local or not. Yeah. John, come and have a word of prayer for us. And if you could especially pray for the plans of the churches and the SMART goals and all that would be excellent. Yeah.
Well, hey, guys, I just wanted to say personally, I am very thankful to you. I appreciate you are valued and appreciated by me personally, and I'm sure everybody who's participated today. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and I'll pray for our stuff, but also pray for you guys. So, yeah, and I want to ask you guys as I pray, let's join our hearts and minds, because I believe what we're doing here, I just want to inspire you to hold the seeds that have been planted in our minds, the Lord's seeds that have been planted in our hearts and minds. May we value them, right? May we value them, and may we know that we have a part to take it to our churches and our body, and may this work of evangelism, I believe the time is now, right? That we have you personally, and we together have a very important role to play in our communities. So let's pray. Father in heaven, we are grateful to you. I just feel like this time together we've had, you saw it coming, and you actually, I believe you helped it happen, Lord. So we just give you praise and glory for this time we've shared together. And we do ask, Lord, that you would bless some of the plans that we've had, bless the seeds that have been planted in our minds and hearts. Lord, may they grow. And like I said earlier, may they bear fruit. We long to see fruit. And ultimately that means souls for the kingdom, people in heaven, Lord. So we just pray that you would grow these seeds and bear fruit. And I want to pray for Tim and Rob and Andy. in their ministry. Lord, they've come and devoted their time. This is their work that they do. And we here appreciate them and value them. And we just pray here together. We join our hearts in asking a blessing upon them and their work and their ministry. And just bless them and guide them, continue to give them wisdom, give them endurance, bless their families. And we just say thank you to them, Lord. Thank you to you. Thank you, Jesus. In your name, amen. Thank you, guys, for being here and participating. And may God bless you. Have a good afternoon.